In the summer of 2016, I was assigned to one of the line companies as one of their primary medics. And I remember we were marching down to the showers. And you got to have a shower maybe every 3 or 4 days or so, which, after a while, you kind of forgot the smell. And I remember we had changed and we didn't have any gear on it, so I just had my uniform on me, and all of our gear was back at the camp, and I heard someone cry out medic real loud, and I kind of looked around and I saw, there were people over to my right, about 300 meters down. And so I hurried over there, and there was a soldier who was exhausted. Seemed like they might have been a heat casualty or something. And I remember sitting there. We loosened as much clothing as we could. And I past that, I kept thinking, I don't have anything else to treat the soldier with. And I'm thinking maybe I can just run water over them in the showers, right, until an ambulance gets here. So that way you can kind of control their core temperature enough so that they didn't overheat and die. And as I'm trying to think of something to buy a few seconds, a few minutes, like magic, my friend Adam shows up, and his junior medic is a guy named Dustin, and Adam is to my right, and he's handing me IV bags, and Dustin's to my left. He's getting the tube, the needles, everything ready. Adam's, he's like, Lester, you got this. And then I got it. I got the stick, and it worked, and I helped the soldier. And apparently, Adam and Dustin had been out with their unit nearby and heard the cry for medic, and I just got to the soldier first, but I didn't have any supplies. So those two, I am always forever grateful that they were there, that they heard the call, that they ran and helped me out that day, because I'm proud of the work I did that day, but I couldn't have done it without them. They were my superheroes that day. They appeared out of magic, out of nowhere. I needed help, and they were there. That's what being Doc was. In the summer of 2019, I had one final annual training with air quotes with the Indiana Army National Guard, in that I needed to do 2 more weeks to have a good year for my medical separation paperwork. It's all about how many points do you have and all that. And also at the same time, I was getting ready to get married. Right, this would have been June of 2019. And the wedding was due in October of 2019. So weddings can be stressful, full of anxiety, and the idea of being able to go and leave for 2 weeks. Oh man, that was awesome. I was like, yes, please, that sounds amazing. And so all I really did, because at this point I was, on a full dead man profile, and I just had to show up and file paperwork at a medical filing office for 2 weeks. And it wasn't super intense. It was just like, hey, alphabetize these medical records. These are the backup medical records. Everything else is digitized at this point. It's busy work to justify you being there. And I would just kind of show up around 8 o'clock, 8:30. Nobody really cared. And then I'd leave about 3 o'clock. And it was nice. I had a little barracks room with cement walls, and I realized how much I changed when I was there for those 2 weeks, right? Because when I first joined the Indiana Army National Guard, when I'd first joined that infantry unit, I was broke as a joke and half as funny. And so I'd go to the USO and I'd swipe as much free toothpaste, toothbrush, deodorant, whatever as I could. I'd beg, borrow, and steal any MREs I can get my hands on. And I was feeling kind of nostalgic because this was going to be my last ride, right? This would be my last 2 weeks in uniform, my last time in uniform, really. And so I'm like, I'll do that again. And then when I got there, I was in the USO, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll see what toothpaste I can get. But then I'm like, I've got money for toothpaste, and then I was like, I'll eat MREs, and I'm eating MREs, and then I realized, oh, I'm kind of used to better food now because I wasn't broke anymore. And then I ate at the chow hall, and there's so much like sodium and fat, and the food was just gross. And so I woke up in the middle of the night and just threw up in the bathroom. The food was so bad. And then I'm like, oh, that's right. You're not a kid anymore. Like, so I just went to the All Ranks Club on Post, and I ate there for, breakfast, lunch, and dinner practically. And then I'd go hang out at the filing place and file paperwork. And I go for walks in the evening, I was just kind of taking it all in one last time. I ran into my old sergeant major there, and he was not happy to see me. Because I'm walking in the barracks, and I hear this familiar voice say, "Stop!" And I stop, and I turn around and go to parade rest, and he goes, "What's your name?" And I was like, it's and Lester. He goes, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And I'm like, I was told to sleep here. By who? Like, Post Housing sent me here, Sergeant Major. I'm not in your battalion anymore. I got transferred. I'm in med hold because I'm getting medically discharged. And he's like, "When's your final date?" And I'm like, "I don't know. They haven't told me yet." "Good luck, soldier." "Thank you, Sergeant Major." And I just left. That was his job as Sergeant Major, is to yell at the knuckleheads, and I had been a knucklehead once or twice, so he recognized me, and recognized me from behind. Oh, that's funny. There was this time when I was in his battalion that we were out in the field, and then I came back to do laundry, and the post laundry building that had all the different laundry services, and it was full, and it was going to be full for hours. And I knew of this barracks that was unoccupied on the base, and I knew the back door was unlocked, and I knew they had a washer and dryer that no one was using. And so I went in there, and then I just did my laundry, and I took a nap on the couch. And then I get a phone call, and then my platoon sergeant's like, "Hey, why am I getting phone calls saying that you're in a barracks right now doing laundry?" And I was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm about to get out of here." So when the sergeant major saw me, I don't blame him for being upset and suspicious. I ran into people I hadn't seen for years. I ran into the soldier that I put into an ambulance that I talked about in the previous episode. And they were a corporal when I ran into them, and it was so great to see them again. And I got to telling how good of a job they were doing, and I'm like, "Hey, you're doing great, man. I'm so proud that you're a corporal now." Because last time I saw them, they were in E2, and I ran into an old platoon sergeant from 2013, 2014. I hadn't seen him in a long time because he was the platoon sergeant when I had first gotten to the infantry company. And I remember the first conversation I had with him was he was telling me that, "Oh yeah, we just lost 3 or 4 medics to the Egypt deployment, so I'm glad we're getting some reinforcements." And I thought, "Holy crap, you had 4 people die? You had that many casualties?" And he's like, "No, they just transferred out." And I was like, "Oh, Jesus Christ." I was so wound and tight back then. I remember, and this guy was my platoon sergeant, I thought we had a 3-day drill, but it was a 2-day drill, but I thought it was a 3-day drill. And I remember I'm at the company, and no one's there. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm either really, really early, or I'm so incredibly late. Because I kept thinking at this point, oh my God, they've just packed up and left already. And then I call him, and then he calls me back, and I remember him saying, "Hey there, hard charger. You know you're a day early, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, I did not know that." And he goes, "Oh, well, you want me to, like, put you on some orders so you can get paid for today?" And I said, "No, thank you. I'm just going to go back to my hotel and sleep." And in the story of my enlistment, they weren't major players. They're more like minor characters at the finale, right? It was like, I remember the last time I saluted an officer while walking in uniform. I was walking down from the All Ranks Club on base back to my barracks room, and there was a butter bar, and he looked all of 23, maybe 24. And then I raised my hand and saluted, and I said, "Good morning, sir." And he returned the salute and said, "Good morning," and kept on his way. It's strange how much that moment meant to me, because I kept thinking, oh, that's the last time I'll salute an officer. And it made me flash back to early days in my career when I was stationed at Fort Gordon in Georgia, and there was a comic book store on post, and it closed at about 8:30, something like that. I'd get a hot dog at the hot dog stand nearby and just read comics outside and eat hot dogs for dinner because I was 22 and things were different then. And I remember this Butter Bar LT lady who was always very kind to me, walking outside by the sort of shopette mall area on the base, and she met up with the staff sergeant guy that I also knew, and he brought her flowers, and then she kissed him because they kind of looked around to see if anybody was around, and they couldn't really see me, and I was like, "Oh, hey, they're a couple, that's great." And they weren't in direct chain of command, but you know, the officer NCO fraternization rules are kind of tight, so they kind of had to keep things quiet, and I wasn't going to say anything. And then my 2 weeks were up. It wasn't very eventful. It was, I mean, you know, it was a way to get an extra paycheck and a way to get out of the house. And it was kind of a chance for me to wrap up the Army and kind of say goodbye to everything. And because I'd long since transferred out of the infantry unit, and so they'd all gone off to do their own thing, and God bless them. And it was my chance to kind of put a bow on the experience while in uniform one last time. I wasn't even a medic at that point. All my certifications had lapsed, so I was just a guy. And you know, I was happy to be just a guy. And a few months after that, I got this text message, and I'm on a beach in South Carolina, and I'm walking with my then fiance, now wife, and we're pretty close to the beach house we were staying at. And the text message said, "Hey, your last day is the 18th." And I said, "Cool." And in that moment, I could take stock of just how far I'd gone in life. And I knew what the ending of the story was. I knew how it was all going to play out. And I wished I could go back and tell that kid who didn't think he was going to pass basic training that he would pass. And he'd get to see the world. And he'd get to save lives and meet unbelievable people and see horrific things and go through things that kept him up at night and do things that he would be forever proud of. And he got to be a hero. He got to have an adventure. He got to have a life. And I went back to Camp Atterbury one last time in civilian clothes. And I picked up some paperwork. And I signed out and shook everyone's hand and said, "Thank you for helping me out during the med board process." And I went to the USO one last time, and I kind of walked in, and I just kind of looked around, and I soaked it all in, and I could see in my mind's eye all of the many hours, probably whole days, I had spent there over the years as an E4, as an E5, by myself, with friends, with soldiers, working on CEUs for my medical certifications, getting out of the heat, just being a soldier. And then I looked around at all the new faces, the new soldiers that were there, and I didn't recognize any of them, but I felt like I knew all of them, because I had been each and every one of them at some point or another. With a myriad of experiences that I had in the military, I got to taste All of it. I got to taste every piece. And I was full. And I was so grateful. And then the pandemic hit. And it was early days of the pandemic in about April 2020. I had seen the movie Contagion years ago and remembered the scene when there were just piles of trash everywhere because all of the garbage collectors either wouldn't show up to work or got sick. And that was not a serious concern where I was at, but at the time, none of us really knew just how bad this thing was going to be. So in my head, I thought, oh, that's an example of a worst case scenario, right? We don't know how deep this rabbit hole is going to go. So I need to make a plan based on that worst case scenario, which boiled down to if we have to go as much as 30 days in between trash pickups, how do I handle that? Which this situation never came to pass. You know, they suspended big trash pickup in our area, and somebody in charge was probably asking the same question, right? Like, how do we conserve resources if things get spread thin? But so what I did was, well, I started composting. So I thought, oh, a large percentage of our trash is organic waste. It's vegetables, it's fruit, it's things that go into, it's coffee grounds, right? It's things that go into compost. So if our trash started to pile up, that cuts a big portion of it out. And then I thought, oh, well, we could just save all of our cardboard boxes. We were kind of doing that anyway. We had cats, so I thought, oh, we can just save all of our plastic bags as litter bags, because who knows when we're getting more plastic bags again. And with recycling, what we've been doing, what you're really supposed to do, is we wash the recyclables before we put it in the recycling, right? Because if there's food particles in your recycling, then it contaminates a lot. I don't know the specifics of it. This is just what I read on the website. And with that, you know, like if you've got a bunch of like plastic takeout, whatever, then it's all washed. Well, then, you know, I've got a basement. I could sit on it for a while. And then with all of this, it made me think, oh, this is how much trash is coming in through the house. Correspondingly, I thought, oh, if us as a 2-person household is generating this much trash, how much is everyone else generating? Answer is probably a lot. It was March of 2021, and I got the first dose of the COVID vaccine. And as I happily drove to the VA to get it, I turned on my phone, hooked the Bluetooth up, and played the song Home by the Foo Fighters. And it reminded me of a time when I was in medic school listening to the CD Wishing I Was Home. And during the pandemic, it felt like none of us were home, like we were someplace else. It felt like a deployment, to be honest. And as I drove to the hospital to get that first vaccine, as the music played and the tears welled up in my eyes, and I thought about how grateful I felt to be alive, to be an American, to be one of the lucky ones who got the vaccine, and the millions who died that didn't get that chance. And the music played in my thoughts and my memories as I walked around the hospital. And the joy that the song brought me, the sense of longing, the quest for peace, the stable memory of the before was all there. It was there for me my first time in medic school when I just wanted to go back home to the trailer park with my parents. It was there in Iraq. It was there in the pandemic, because all we ever wanted was to be home. And that first dose of the vaccine was like coming home, and I was so grateful.